So, good afternoon to all the viewers of this particular course. I am Hitendra Padalia from Forestry and Ecology Division of IIRS, and today I am going to talk about the application of remote sensing and GIS in forestry and ecology. So, as you see these slides today, we are collecting geographic data using a variety of instrumentations, and that includes satellites, uh, which are giving us from global to local coverage, and we also have aircrafts, and we collect a lot of remote sensing data through aircrafts, and we also talking about unmanned aerial vehicle for collecting remote sensing data images, and more recently we have drones, which are used for collecting remote sensing data. But other than these things, we have other kind of instrumentation on ground, which today is being used for collecting geographic data, such as the smart devices like mobile phone, which is used for collecting location information of different targets. And then we have techniques like satellite telemetry, and which is used to collect the data on a variety of animal species, and in this we are using a combination of satellite collar and the satellites for collecting the data. And then the data is also being collected on other abiotic factors of the environment. So we have different sources from where the data is coming in geographic information systems. And since this is the basic course, and in the previous lectures, I think you have been already been apprised about the definitions and the utilities of remote sensing, GIS, and GNSS or GPS, what we used to call earlier. Now, you know that you might have seen an earlier lecture that India has its own remote sensing program, and particularly Indian Space Research Organization has launched several satellites for natural resource inventory, including for forestry applications. And these satellite data are acquired at different spatial, spectral, and temporal resolutions. And a glance of these is given in the slides. You may see that in the resource set series of satellites which India has started in 2003, and here we have three uh, different type of sensors. Here you can see that advanced wide field sensors, which offers you spatial resolution of 56 meter, and this kind of data is having very large swath, 700 kilometer of swath, and it's very good for studying a larger area. And you know that forest in India is about 24% of coverage, and mostly these forest areas are some located in very remote areas of the where unapproachable areas. And these type of data, which are very large swath and very high temporal repeativity of say 5 days, and this type of data is very useful for understanding the regional vegetation cover and the dynamics. Then second level, we also have list 3 data, and list 3 data, you know that this is a workhorse data as far as the different type of classification of the vegetation and land use land cover is concerned. And this is at a better resolution than AWIPS at 23.5 meter resolution, with 4 spectral bands located in green NIR, green, red NIR, and SWIR region. And this data is also being extensively used in forestry application, particularly forest cover monitoring in the country. Then we at a finer resolution, that we can call it a high resolution data, that is list for multispectral data, that is also being captured in nadir as well as in off nadir mode. And now we have in fact improved its swath also. Now it is covering around 70 kilometer swath. So this data is having a higher resolution of 5.8 meter resolution, and this data is very good for forestry application, particularly monitoring the small changes which takes place in the forest areas. And then we also have added a black panchromatic image. You can see here black and white image, that is called cartosats image, and this image is coming from our cartosat series of satellites, and this is a 2.5-meter resolution, where although color is not there, but in black and white also you can see variation in forest cover, density, for example. If you want to study the texture of the forest canopy, this type of data is very useful. So and there are other satellites also which have been launched by India and other countries, like Landsat satellite from NASA is being extensively used globally for such applications. And recently in 2004, ESA, European Space Agency, has started the Sentinel series, and which is offering you the Sentinel 2A data, multispectral data, and that is also is a very good data in terms of spectral resolution. So we have today variety of option, variety of satellite data source for doing forestry applications. Now this slide shows the I have just listed the kind of applications we have already done using these mostly with our own satellite data sets, and these includes that we have been doing now forest cover mapping every 2 year, and at 1:50,000 scale we are monitoring our forest cover. Then another attempt is that we are also doing we started monitoring the forest cover at sub-annual basis. So this is another things what we are doing with AWIPS data. Then we have also done a national level biodiversity project under wherein we have used our satellite data sets for preparing vegetation type map, for example, for preparing maps like biodiversity, richness maps. Then forest type mapping is another area where we have used. So one is forest cover mapping, how much is the forest, how much is the land area covered with tree. But another piece of information which is required in forest management is the type, how many types of vegetation of forest are there. That also we have completed at national level. Then we have been using the forest satellite data for forest fire monitoring, and the satellite data which are having very high temporal resolution. For example, every day if some satellite is able to give the image of a particular area, and it is also having thermal bands, so then it can be used for things like forest fire monitoring. Also, that is also we have been doing in the country. And another important thing is that where the satellite data inputs are required is the management of our forest area. For example, the management of territorial forest areas, where we have a working forest working plan as a management plan based on which the management of the forest is carried out in the country. And here also we have a remote sensing data used in preparing different types of thematic layers. And then wildlife habitat and protected area management is another thing for which also there are management plans for the different national parks and sanctuaries in the country. They have their own management plans, and in preparation of these management plan also we need the input of remote sensing, GIS, and satellite data. Now these all these thing activities has actually benefited our programs and schemes in forestry sectors over the years. We have the major benefit which has come from satellite remote sensing, and particularly remote sensing, GIS, and geospatial applications is the sustainable forest resource management, biodiversity conservation and protection, wildlife conservation. Eco-sensitive zonation is a new term. Eco-sensitive areas we are going to declare around the national parks and sanctuaries to provide safety buffer to such areas. Then joint forest management, where the forest department and the people, they come together and manage a particular land area. So this is here also we have high resolution data which is being used for resource inventory and monitoring. And similarly, I discussed like forest fire control. In forest fire control, particularly active fire information is being generated nowadays from satellite data and is being given to the state forest departments. And another area which is now emerging is the strategic environmental assessment. You are aware of environmental impact assessment, which is done based on a project basis. Now there is a broader analysis of impact of different projects. So that is done under the strategic environmental impact assessment. Here also satellite data has a lot of potential to be used in future. Now So this is just I have given an overview of that, what kind of operational products and services are being already in use, and what are the major benefit we have drawn from the remote sensing. Now I am showing you some of the maps which we have prepared using satellite remote sensing, and very early in around maybe in around 2000 we have prepared this biome level map of the India. So this is kind of ecological classification of the vegetation, the natural vegetation of the country. So here basically we have used, the WIPS is satellite data, which used to be having 180-meter spatial resolution, and then from Indian satellite, and we integrated this with the temperature and precipitation information, and then we have generated classification, biome level classification of the India. So when you will look closely on this legend, you will find that you can describe our vegetation of the country, for example, like tropical rainforest, tropical moist forest, tropical dry forest, tropical thorn forest, and tropical desert forest. So such kind of legend can be prepared when you have satellite data on one hand, and as well as information on temperature and precipitation on the other hand. And then when you combine these three pieces of information, you can generate a climate and vegetation type map of a particular area, and which is called a biome level classification. Another map which we have generated at a finer scale, that is at 1:50,000 scale, that is vegetation type map of the country. Here again we have devised a classification scheme which is amenable to, or which is useful for remote sensing data. So here what we have done is we have classified the vegetation of the entire country into different classes, just like mixed natural forest and local specific formation, degraded formation, grasslands, and similarly outside the forest areas, different cash crop, like betel nut, coconut. So we have done extensive. You can see from this slide that there are so many number of classes here. So extensive exercise was done here, and for different part of the country, different date satellite data were used, and then the satellite data were integrated, and then this type of representation of vegetation type of the country has been generated. So this is another very important work which has been done using satellite remote sensing data. Then nowadays we are focusing on a finer scale again, that is called community level classification. Here we are going up to 1:15,000 scale, 1:20,000 scale. At this scale basically information is required for working plan. So we are preparing the community level map using higher resolution of satellite data. Another piece of information which have been generated using satellite data that we have now monitoring, one is that we are doing land use land cover mapping for the entire country at 5-year interval at 1:50,000 scale. So this already we have completed 3 cycle, and one of the map which is actually this is done at 5 year interval using list 3 data, and the database you can see in ISRO Bhuvan portal. But another activity which you do for land use land cover mapping is at 2,50,000 using AWEPS data, where we are since 2005 now we have almost 17 to 18 yearly maps we have prepared, and this is one of the map, and this is the kind of classes we are actually delineating here, broad classes using AWEPS data. So for every year we have one land use land cover map we are generating from our own satellite data. And then you can see that this image which shows that there are yellow color areas, and but there are red color areas are also visible. These are the areas where actually there have been changes in the forest cover. So this is the changes in the forest cover. So this is a kind of time series analysis using AWEPS data, and wherein we are generating alerts. So these each dots, red dot indicating the alert of forest change. So forest change alert is been such kind of system has been developed where the forest department can be reported about the positive or negative change in vegetation using time series AWEPS data. Then this is one example from northeastern region. You see the utility of time series satellite data of from different sources, including Indian data as well as the other data set, Landsat series of satellite data set. And from this example, you can very well understand that if you have to monitor our forest areas, then we need to monitor them uh, at a time series level, and then that gives us the understanding how the in a particular area the forest have been lost, what is the pattern of loss of forest. And this is kind of such areas are there in the country still today, for example in northeastern region where high rate of deforestation is there, and the satellite data helps us in monitoring such areas. Then we did a project on biodiversity mapping also here in IIRS, and this is a national project we did, and you can see here 4 maps which we have put here. These maps represent vegetation type map, fragmentation, disturbance index, and biological richness map. And now for your understanding, I would like to tell that this data, these maps, the first map is the vegetation type map, for example. So this is basically generated, you know that we have used satellite images as well as we have done ground truthing, and we have done digital classification for delineating different type of forest types here, and vegetation type, and non as well as the non-forest classes. But the last map you see here is a biological richness map. So this is an integration of several things. We have laid out something around 16,000 sample plots across country, and this project started in 1997 and ended in 2010. And during this time interval, we laid out something around 16,000 sample plot. And then this at each sample plot, we have done the inventory of the trees, herbs, shrubs, climbers, and so we have actually, this is representation of the biological richness. This map shows the representation of biological richness, and we have integrated this field data with the vegetation type, and we have also adapted a landscape ecological matrix here for generation of this biological richness map. So this is the application of a GIS here for biodiversity prioritization areas which we need to focus in future, where areas which are actually receiving more disturbance and where more priority basis fund has to be allocated. So this type of biological richness maps helps in such decision making. And we in fact have made a biodiversity information system also, where all the data which have been collected is stored. And as a part of this biodiversity mapping, we followed a methodology here, and this flow chart is shown here. You can see that there are different inputs are going from different directions. From field also inputs are being taken, from satellite images also been taken, and there are other kind of layers. You can later on see it. And then finally we have generated a biological richness map using a multi-criteria approach here. So so this type of analysis is possible. Use of GIS extensively has been done here using geographic information system, GPS, because field plots and their location has been decided based on GPS, and then satellite data we have integrated here. And for more information, you can actually access our see our IRS website, and there you will find this report, biodiversity characterization at landscape level, and then this can give you more detail about how this entire work has been done in different phases and covering entire country, and also what is the relevance of such kind of studies for biodiversity conservation. Then this is another piece of this example which shows that how we can use GIS and statistical modeling techniques in making maps like species richness map. Richness map means this map is showing you the how many species are present in a particular grid here. So this is very interesting because, for example, this study has been done in the alpine areas of Uttarakhand, and these are called bugyals. In bugyals, you will have basically grasses and shrubs, herbs, variety of plants are there. And so in this exercise, what we have done is we have used the GIS again, and we have collected sample plots. You can see that quadrates we have laid out on ground, and then several quadrant were laid out here. Something around 97 sites we have visited, and then we have collected the plants, how many plants are present in a particular site, and then these numbers, the species number, we have correlated with different types of variable, environmental variable, most of them which were derived using satellite data, and we have prepared a community level map of this area. Also you can see that there are different grass formations are there listed here. So the basic idea is that this type of modeling exercise we have used here, generalized linear model. Okay, so this type of statistical model nowadays, a lot of R software is there where a lot of statistical models are there. So if you have such kind of number data also from the field, you can relate to various environmental variable and you can generate the representation of, for example, the biodiversity we have done here, species richness for our areas. Otherwise, you know that alpine areas are highly inaccessible. You cannot understand how, what is the biodiversity pattern in those areas. So you have to always go for sampling in limited areas, and then you have to use satellite remote sensing data products, and then you can get estimate of how many, if not two number of species, but estimate of how much richness is there. Then this is another example which I am showing you. This is related to the invasive plant species, and you know that in the country today in forest areas there are several species which are creating problem for in forest regenerations, as well as promoting many areas the forest fire incidences, and also many such species are actually unpalatable to the wildlife. So such species are actually not from our own country, but they have brought from outside, intentionally or unintentionally they are now, but today they are here and they are spreading very fast in different part of the country. Now this type of species, if in a priori, if we know where are the areas in the country these species can invade, so this will be very useful for the resource manager or for the foresters, those who are managing the wildlife and national parks, particularly where there are grasslands in the national parks and sanctuaries. And these species, if they invade the grassland areas, then they will reduce the actually the area for the native grass species, and that will have a negative impact on wildlife population. So for this purpose, we use this. So we were having the field points from the biodiversity project for entire country, and in several many means in plots we got these invasive presence of these exotic plants in our biodiversity plots, and then that data we used with the environmental variable, and we predicted the hotspots of invasion. So you can see this map, it's representing the hotspots map for the invasion. So what we found that in central Indian landscape, this area, you know, we have dry deciduous forest, large area under dry deciduous forest, and this is the area where we also have the national parks like Kanha and Painch national parks, which are rich in wildlife and ungulate population, deer population, elephant populations, which require fodder. So this is the area where actually in coming year many of the species, like we took 11 species, are going to invade such areas. So this is a very alarming situation, that if on time we don't take proper measure to arrest the further spread of such a species, then otherwise we'll have a problem in near future. So this is a this is type of analysis called ecological niche modeling, and we use, so there are a lot of publication nowadays. You can go through internet and just see how this kind of ecological niche modeling is done. And these are the portal nowadays. Geo portals are becoming very common, and but we started this making this portal very early in 2005. This biodiversity information system at the time we developed, and then we also developed Indian bioresource information network. So first portal, which is biodiversity information system, here we have done put all the data which we collected as part of our biodiversity mapping projects, and this is the link given. And then the another thing which we did it, we developed the Indian bioresource information network with support of the Department of Biotechnology. So here, besides keeping the our own data which on for the projects which we have carried out, we have also asked other partner institutions which are working on biodiversity to share their data. So they have also shared, and now this website has been developed, and here we hire here we have hosted all the data. You can also visit this website and see the kind of data available there. So and now we also have another study which is going on right now in the country, that we are going to intensively study around 9 sites across country for biodiversity monitoring at community level we are doing. So here we are going to use high resolution remote sensing data to develop essential biodiversity variables, so that the idea is that whether it is possible to develop a remote sensing based approach to monitor the changes in the biodiversity. So if you can suggest such an approach, so it will be very useful. That otherwise, you know, that biodiversity monitoring from field method is very challenging, and it takes a lot of time, lot of labor, and not cost effective as well. So for that matter, if remote sensing something, some methodology can be developed using remote sensing methods, then it will be effective for covering large area also, and timely assessment can also be done. And then another trend, you all are using mobile apps. We have also developed mobile apps as part of Indian Bioresource Information Network, and this mobile apps has a functionality that this can give you the latitude longitude information when you take a photograph of a particular plant species, and this data can be directly uploaded to the IBIN website, and this way it will help actually the collectors, those the taxonomists or botanists, those who go to the field, and they can directly and this also helps in actually systematic data organization as well as the identification of the species by the experts. So these are the advantages, and nowadays the trend is toward developing variety of such apps so that we can actually do biodiversity inventory in a better way. So I have few example here to show you that hyperspectral remote sensing is another area where a lot of focus is right now there. From ISRO side, we have already done several airborne remote sensing campaign in different forest areas, and is currently going on also. And Everest NG is a sensor which we have brought from NASA, and we have flown several forest sites, and we are trying to generate case studies and showing how what is the potential of hyperspectral remote sensing, particularly in forest characterization of forest, and retrieval of variable like chlorophyll, nitrogen content of the leaf. So these type of exercises are also going on, with particularly with advanced sensors like hyperspectral remote sensing. Okay, this is the study we did actually in Andaman Islands, in Middle Andaman. So this is the procedure how we have actually collected the field data, and then we have computed the canopy leaf area index, and we have also collected sample, and then we have estimated the quantity of chlorophyll, nitrogen at a different plot level, and then we have then we have actually prepared these maps. So these maps are showing the chlorophyll and leaf area index of the mangrove area in Middle Andaman, and similarly this map shows the canopy chlorophyll content for the Middle Andaman Island. So if you have information like this is traditionally not available. Traditionally we have been using in forestry sector maps, forest type, density map, but now in coming year there is a possibility that we will be using the maps of LAI, maps of chlorophyll content, nitrogen content. So this type of mapping will be very useful for systematic understanding of the ecosystem, what is happening there, how is the health of the ecosystem, what are the stresses. Then at national level we have done national carbon project. So you know the carbon is nowadays very important commodity, and we want to assess the potential of different forest types which are in the country, that how much carbon is stored there, and as well as how much is their capacity to sequester carbon. So this is very important, because for as a part of greenhouse gas inventory, we know that we have to report this. Every country has now bounded with this, that they have to report their greenhouse gas emission. So we have generated this benchmark map for which shows the phytomass carbon density for the country, different level of you can see here. So again, in this type preparation of this type of map also, we have laid out large number of sample plot across country, and then there we have done inventory of the biomass and carbon, and then we have generated this special representation of forest carbon for the country. And this is another area where actually now it is a lot of emphasis is on use of SAR remote sensing microwave remote sensing, what we call it, for retrieving biophysical parameter of the forest, such as forest height map, forest biomass map, and forest structure. So these are the things which are nowadays being targeted for with SAR remote sensing, because SAR has a unique advantage that it can have a penetration in the forest canopy, as well as it is sensitive to the structure of the vegetation, moisture content. So I have kept here two example. You can see that one of the example is that this image is a lost image, a lost 2 image, and this is just like the FCC image. You can see, you can say, but this is different. It is, these colors are not in microwave remote sensing. Basically microwave remote sensing sense the scattering, but we have given colors, different scattering type, we have defined different type of colors, and then you can see that this type of image become a lot of utility, because you see that different features are different, represented in different colors. So this is called polarimetry data, hyperpolarimetry data. And then we have another biomass map we have derived from field-based inventory, and as well as we have integrated this allows2 data, and we have presented this biomass map, above ground biomass map of this plantation area, where there is a variation in terms of carbon stocks in different plantation stands. So this is the range of biomass here. So this is another area you can in future, if you want to use this type of technologies, that there are a lot of satellites, including Indian on satellite NISAR, NASA India SAR satellite is going to be launched in 2022-21 time. So that time we will have a lot of availability of L-band SAR data from our own satellites. So at the time we will have a lot of opportunity to use such data for developing such types of maps. And then this is a vertical profile of the forest derived using terrestrial laser scanner. You know, laser remote sensing is another very powerful technology in forestry sector, which can be used for deriving very accurate height estimates of the forest tree heights or forest canopy heights. And here this is based on terrestrial instrument. This is called terrestrial laser scanning system, and which can actually provide you an overview of forest vertical profile. And here you can see that it can generate millions of points from its radius, and these points, when you drap over it the photographs, normal photograph, RGB photograph, then you get a representation of the vertical profile, wherein you can see that it gives you an idea that how many layers of vegetations, undergrowth, middle growth, and top growths are available in a particular area, how many different types of species that they can, based on their morphology or physiognomy, can be identified. So and then it also shows that when ground data was related to this data, and then it was found that this is working very well for particularly the DBH, you know, the diameter at rust height, which what we measure in forestry for different trees. So that is possible to derive very accurately using such instrumentation. So LiDAR remote sensing is a very important area in forestry. And right now we have satellite also, ICSat-2 satellite from NASA has been recently launched to last months or so, that is going to give you a global availability, global LiDAR data, and this type of data will be very useful for biomass mapping, for forest height map generations. Already you know that if you browse the Google, you will find that already at global level there is a canopy height map is available for the globe level, and that they derived using ICSat-1, which was launched in 2003, and it actually stopped working in 2009. But now with ICSat-2 satellite, we have a possibility of deriving a very high resolution height map, where height will be more accurate for different part of the globe for forest areas. And then we have another area of application of remote sensing. Here actually it is basically satellite remote sensing is always there, but here we are actually interested in monitoring the gaseous exchange between the forest canopy and the atmosphere. And you know that forest are the responsible for photosynthesis. For trees do photosynthesis, and photosynthesis releases your oxygen, which is required, as well as forest to do respiration. So respiration, they release carbon dioxide. So if you can monitor this exchange of gaseous exchange, and even water vapor, you know that from the canopy, the leaf, the water vapor get exchange happens between the immediate atmosphere and the canopy. So if these fluxes of these gases and including the energy can be monitored at a very fine scale, so then this type of data is very useful for understanding the carbon cycle, for example. So it will tell you that how much a forest area is sequestrating carbon in a particular place, and what is the rate of carbon uptake from the canopy. If you have a biology background, you might have studied deep thing as part of your curriculum, photosynthesis, respiration, and for example transpirations. All these processes can be, nowadays it is possible to monitor in field using these towers which are called eddy flux tower, and these flux towers have actually various kind of instrumentation mounted on it, and these instrumentation record these exchange of gases at a very high speed, and these data then we integrate with models, and there are several models in remote sensing. GIS based models are available for predicting the carbon storage and exchange in forest ecosystem. So if we so this type of instrumentation in remote sensing is required to validate the what type of product we generate from remote sensing. So this is another area, research area, basically R&D area. And then this is another thing is forest phenology monitoring. Already I told that forest undergo changes, and particularly deciduous forest where leaf fall happens and then new leaves comes. So all these things, leaf flushing, peak leaf growth, as well as senescence period in the vegetation, is possible to monitor using satellite remote sensing. One example I have shown you here. One is the peak leaf growth, and another is a dry season when there is no chlorophyll content in the forest area. Similarly, you see that nowadays a lot of other kind of instrumentations are also coming in forestry sector, like phenocams. So these are the camera which monitor the phenological changes at a very high speed, and you can generate a time lapse of such things, such images, and you can understand how the deciduous forest, how the leaf changes happens, how what is the timing of such phenological events. All those things can be studied in detail using phenocam observations. And then this is another possibility that we have a long series of satellite data from Indian satellites, that now we have almost from 1987 we launched our first satellites. Now we have from list 3 satellite data, for example, it is of last 20 year of satellite data we have. So similarly we have topo sheets from the past. So if we have to monitor something like large scale deforestation in the country, so for that, such long-term satellite data is quite useful. And in this study, what we have shown is that in different elephant ranging areas in the country, particularly the wild elephant, they are found in 4 major pockets in Western Himalaya, Northeast, Central India, and South India. And this is the example of the northeastern region. And these red color is showing the area where there has been complete loss of forest in between 1930 to 1975. So these type of analysis are also possible today, that when you take the different time interval images of a particular area, and then you can actually using GIS you can monitor such areas whether there is a gain of forest cover or loss of forest cover, and then you can relate this information with the things like elephant movement we have done in this area, and you can understand why these animals and human conflicts are happening in a particular place. Like that we have a lot of people that died due to this elephant human conflict, and same several elephants, a lot of elephant mortality also happens, both side damage happens. Because why? Because that forest cover is shrinking in many areas, and movement route of these animals where deforestation is happening. So because of that there is a clash, and then this so this type of analysis is actually very useful, and this is one example I have shown. And then forest fire prevention and management is the activity of the forest department. They want to prevent fire, in particular in summer season. We have a lot of areas in the country, because we have predominance of dry deciduous forest. Also in many parts of Himalaya, we have cheed pine forests, which contain resin, and they're highly inflammable in character. And such areas we need to prevent from fire. And fire also nowadays, dryness is increasing in the atmosphere, and then we have episodic fire events are happening where large forest areas are are burned. Now for such things we have 3-4 different applications from remote sensing. You can actually map the burnt area from remote sensing, how many area has actually burnt. You can also predict the areas where there is a likely occurrence of forest fire. In India, most of the fire are man-made fire, but you can at least before if fire happens, if you can tell the areas which are losing moisture, where there is a high inflammable fuel is there, or there is a high wind velocity is there, or atmospheric conditions are very suitable for forest fire. So such area is possible to predict and in advance, and then warning can be given to the forest department that they can accordingly take action and send their people there, and so that preventive measure can be taken. So another thing is that nowadays satellite data is also able to monitor the active fire. So when fire is actually taking place on ground at a time, temperature is very high. So if a satellite is passing from that area, and if it has a thermal bands or middle infrared bands, then they have the ability to figure out the anomaly in temperature on ground. So that temperature anomaly can be detected as of hot spots of fire. So this nowadays we are able to monitor in a day. We are able to capture 6 observations from these are basically foreign satellite like MODIS and VIIRS satellites we have, and then these we have where we are. It is quite effective in terms of like forest department has already started using these technologies for forest fire monitoring. So active fire monitoring is happening at a operational level, and then there are other things like you can do recovery assessment also after when an area has been burnt, and then subsequently you can acquire the images and also see that how the recovery of the vegetation is taking place in a particular burnt area. So that kind of applications are also possible, and you can see these how these this picture in this picture that burnt area can be separated, and flame, red color flame is visible, smoke is also visible. And so remote sensing data is quite useful as far as forest fire monitoring is concerned. And another application of forest in forestry from satellite data is when you use very high resolution satellite data like cartosat data. I told you 2.5 meter resolutions. So this type of data is useful particularly in forestry sector, is that when we try to digitize the forest boundaries, because we have a lot of encroachment in forest along the forest boundaries, and if we don't have a properly digitized boundaries and maps, we cannot monitor such areas. And these changes are also happening very over a very large area, and all the areas are very difficult to patrol such areas. So very high resolution data is having a lot of utility here. And here already in country we are today have a national level this thing is happening, that we are using DGPS. You might have heard about these instruments for collecting precise location along the boundary of the forest, and the location of the forest boundary pillar. And then we are where they are we are also using taking the help of the high resolution satellite data for location of the forest boundaries, and resettlements of these cases of encroachment actually is taking place with high resolution data. So this is another area where actually maybe academically it is not that much important, but for forest department it is very useful things that the high resolution data which is offering to them. Now another thing, later on maybe you will have a class also on this Bhuvan ISRO Geo portal, and ISRO has developed several portals, geospatial portals. You will come across ISRO Bhuvan is one, and we have Vedas portal also, and we have Mosdog portal also. So these portals are providing a variety of special products and services, and you can use such products and services in forestry sector in a great deal, because we have several things that today is being done by the state forest department, such as the planning for afforestation and reforestation site is being done through satellite data, monitoring of soil and water conservation activity, particularly the physical infrastructure which comes on the ground, and the recharging ground recharging water recharging structure, etc. We are able to tank, and for example we are able to monitor using high resolution satellite data. And similarly asset mapping, for example in a protected area where there is a watchtower, where there is a guest house, and where there is a main office, all those places can be today tagged, and the asset mapping is also possible and is being done online by the forest department. And other activities of forestry sector, there are several schemes which are happening in forestry. Manrega scheme is there. There are other under different scheme, roads are being built. All these things are being today geotagged, and the information is being updated on portal, and this is useful. And similarly people participation, the geospatial technology, particularly these portals with mobile apps, they are also available for the public, that they can also contribute to enriching these the information on different aspects of forest management. From the ground they can fetch the information to these portals, and then the value addition to the existing satellite map and thematic layers can be done, and this overall can actually be very useful for the management of the forest. Now then you can go through the one of the example I have taken from Bhuvan website. You can go through, I have listed the kind of information relevant to forestry sector, environment sector and ecology sector is available there. I have just listed it here because it is not that this portal is housing just the information from the data collected from ISRO organization, but there are other organizations like Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, and there are several other organizations like Wildlife Institute of India. They have shared their data here, and then you can at a single window, in a single window you can see several kind of information, and you can effectively use it for the conservation and management. And then in every area, in every discipline, there are certain challenges also, which in for which we need to develop efficient satellite system and sensors in future, and so that the current problems which are faced in forestry sectors by the foresters, that can be resolved. So for example, these are some of the things I have listed here, and you can further go into detail that what kind of requirement is there. For example, species discrimination, we have a lot of demands from the user, that sometimes they ask that we want to map the medicinally important species, economically important species. So for that we need to have a high spectral resolution satellite imageries, so that the work is going on in that direction. Forest cover monitoring, there is also requirement that monsoon season particularly, a lot of encroachment happens in forest areas at that time. How effectively we can use satellite remote sensing for monitoring such incidences. And then forest degradation, there is deforestation. You might have heard that that is the permanent change of forest into non-forest, but there is another thing which is called deforestation, degradation. So degradation happens within the forest areas, and this is also happening at a very large scale in the country, because we have very high dependency in the forest areas, and people move inside the forest areas for fuel wood fodder collections, and so as a result we have actually degraded our forest, and we need higher spectral resolution data, and so that we can monitor degradation as well. Then biomass and carbon dynamics, already I have explained that we already have one map prepared, benchmark map, but additionally we need data, microwave lidar kind of data we required, so that we can further improve the existing database, as well as we can generate the estimates of what is available in our forest, how much is the current quantity of carbon and biomass, more precisely we can assess. And then there are other things like forest fire also, we need information on fuel characteristics, how much is the litter, dry litter in a particular forest, how much is the quantity of dry wood, which is fallen wood on the forest floor. So all those things, if they can be retrieved with a better accuracy, then this all will improve your fire management activities. So these are some of the things you can later on see. And then these are the satellites I have shown here, that NISAR I have already told, that micro satellites, and this will give L and S band data, and this will be used for biomass inventory. And then we have another satellite which is going to come from ESA, European Space Agency, that is called biomass satellites. So this will be having P band frequency. This will be even more useful for condition like Western Ghats, northeastern India, Andaman Nicobar Islands, where we have very luxuriant growth of forest, and forest are containing very high amount of biomass. So we need wavelength which can penetrate these forests and reach up to the part where biomass is stored, like trunk part. And so biomass mission from ESA will be quite useful for this purpose, and we will get a better mapping of biomass for our areas. And then we are also going to, India is going to have a Cartosat 3 series satellite with 25 centimeter resolution, and this will be very useful for monitoring the small changes which is taking place in the forest areas, and Cartosat 3 data will be useful for that purpose. Overall I have here in my lecture I have talked about several things here, and I have tried to show you that a glance of that how variety of application are being developed using satellite remote sensing here, and that includes optical remote sensing, both LiDAR remote sensing, hyperspectral remote sensing, microwave remote sensing. And what are the possibilities from ground? I talked about, the flux tower data, a lot of in situ instrumentation which is happening on ground. And it is not that we are just relying on remote sensing data alone, but we want to do integrated analysis of forest areas where we need just not data from the satellites and the ground, but also we need a lot of socioeconomic data which are available with different agencies. We want to integrate it, and so that we can provide a better solution to the forest management. So with this, I thank you very much to you all so for paying attention, and then